Rancher, do you fear me? Or secretly desire me? The giant bride's midnight question, Western romance witness, this unbelievable, true inspired story, right here on Whisper of the Past. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share where you're watching from. Let's get started. The night was calm over the endless Texas plains, the kind of silence that pressed down on a man's chest and made him aware of every heartbeat. The moon cast its pale glow across the ranch, silver light spilling over the weathered barns and long wooden fences that held in the restless horses. Coyotes cried somewhere in the distance, their voices lonely and sharp against the dark horizon. It was a night that belonged to secrets, and one that would soon demand truth. Inside the ranch yard, the giant bride stood alone. Her figure rose taller than most men, her shoulders broad, her arms corded with strength born not from vanity, but from labor. She wore a simple cream dress that swayed lightly in the evening wind, though the fabric could never soften the impression she gave, of power contained, of fire waiting beneath still waters. Many men had mocked her size before, others had feared it, but none had dared to truly look at her as a woman. Until now. Until him, the rancher stood a few yards away, hat tipped low to shadow his face. He busied himself with the corral fence, tightening boards that didn't need tightening, adjusting nails that held firm. His hands were rough, calloused from years of roping cattle and hauling hay, but they trembled slightly tonight. The air between them was thick, alive with something unsaid, something too heavy to ignore much longer. She watched him with unblinking eyes, her voice finally cutting through the quiet like a blade across cloth. "Rancher," she said, low but sharp, "do you fear me? Or secretly desire me?" The words fell into the space between them, heavy as stones in a well. The rancher froze, his hand gripping the wood of the fence until his knuckles whitened. He did not look up, for he feared what she might see in his eyes. Fear, yes, but not of her fists or her size. No. It was fear of the truth that had been building inside him from the first day she arrived at his ranch, stepping down from the stagecoach like a figure from a legend. He remembered it as though it had been yesterday. The town had buzzed with talk when she first came, this towering bride promised by circumstance rather than love. Some said she had frightened off men before. Others whispered that she had never been given a fair chance, for the world had no place for a woman so strong. He had not expected her to be beautiful, and yet she was. Not delicate, not fragile, but beautiful, in the way a storm rolling across the plains was beautiful, untamed and impossible to ignore. He had agreed to take her hand, not out of romance, but out of necessity. The ranch was failing, his family gone, and he needed help to keep the land alive. She needed a place where she could belong, a home where her strength would not be a curse, but a blessing. It was a bargain, plain and simple, yet bargains have a way of changing into something else when two hearts are forced to share the same walls. The same meals, the same long days beneath the burning sun. The rancher had tried to keep his distance, speaking to her only when the work demanded it. He told himself it was because he was a man of few words, but the truth was more complicated. Every time she walked past him, the ground seemed to shift beneath his boots. Every time her voice carried across the fields, his chest tightened. And every time her hand brushed his in passing, even by accident, it was as though fire had touched his skin. He feared her, yes, but he feared himself even more. Now, with her question hanging in the night, there was no more room to hide. The giant bride's eyes narrowed, waiting for him to speak. Her patience had been long, but not endless. She had left behind whispers, ridicule, and loneliness to stand here. She would not suffer silence forever. The rancher drew in a breath, long and slow, but no words came. Instead, he bent his head further, staring at the dirt beneath his boots as though the answers might be written there. The horses shuffled restlessly in their stalls. The wind rattled loose boards on the barn, and still he said nothing. His silence was a confession all its own. Desire had rooted itself deep in him, but so had fear. Fear of being small beside her, fear of what the world would say, fear that she would see through him and find him wanting. She took a step closer, her shadow falling over him like a cloak. "Your silence tells me more than words," she said, her tone quieter now, but edged with something dangerous. "You fear me. But there is more, isn't there? I've seen the way your eyes linger when you think I do not notice. I have felt the air change when we stand too close. Do not lie to me, rancher. Not tonight." He swallowed hard, the sound loud in the stillness. His mind spun with the weight of what she demanded. In her eyes, he saw no mockery, no cruelty, only the raw hunger for truth. She was a woman who had faced laughter and scorn, who had been made into something less than human by the cruel tongues of others. She did not ask for flattery. She asked for honesty, no matter how sharp it might cut. The rancher turned then, slowly lifting his head until his eyes met hers. The moonlight caught her face, highlighting the sharp line of her jaw, the strength in her cheekbones, the dark fire burning in her gaze. For a long moment, he simply stared, caught between dread and desire. His lips parted, but the words would not come. All he managed was a hoarse whisper, almost lost to the wind. "I don't know what to say." Her mouth curved, not into a smile, but into something more guarded. "Then say what you feel," she replied. "Even if it shames you, even if it damns us both." The rancher's chest rose and fell, breath trembling. He wanted to tell her everything, that he dreamed of her at night, that he woke in the mornings with her name heavy on his tongue, that the sight of her strength stirred not fear, but longing he could not control. But the words tangled, trapped by years of pride and silence. He only managed a shake of the head before turning away, his hand gripping the fence so tightly the wood groaned under the pressure. Her jaw tightened, and for the first time, her voice cracked with hurt. "Then you do fear me," she said softly, almost to herself. "You fear what I am, and you will never see me as more than a burden you did not choose." She turned, her dress swaying against her legs as she moved toward the barn. Each step echoed against the packed earth, heavy as a drumbeat. The rancher watched her go, his throat burning with words unspoken. He wanted to call after her, to confess that his fear was not of her, but of how much he needed her. Yet the night swallowed his voice, leaving only the sound of the barn door creaking open, then slamming shut. Alone again, he stood in the moonlight, shoulders bowed. The coyotes cried once more, their voices a mournful chorus across the plains. The wind tugged at his hat, carrying with it the faint scent of her, wildflowers and dust. He closed his eyes, the weight of her question pressing harder now than when she had spoken it. Did he fear her? Yes, did he desire her? More than he could ever admit. And that truth, denied but unshakable, would haunt him until he found the courage to answer her at last. Inside the barn, the giant bride leaned against the wooden wall, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She had asked the question not to mock him, but to know if she had finally found a place, a man, where she could be more than her size, more than her strength. She longed for tenderness, for a love that would not shrink from her shadow. His silence cut deeper than cruelty. Yet even in her pain, she felt the tension in him, the truth he could not yet voice. And though her heart ached, a spark of hope remained. Perhaps fear was only the first step toward desire. And perhaps desire could yet lead to something more. The night wore on, stars glimmering above the ranch, secrets swirling between two souls bound by fate. The question had been asked, and though unanswered, it could not be undone. In the quiet hours before dawn, the rancher lay awake, staring at the beams of his cabin ceiling, her words echoing in his mind. "Do you fear me, or secretly desire me?" And in the barn she sat in silence, hands clasped tightly, praying that when the sun rose, it would bring with it the truth she had longed to hear all her life. The morning sun crept slowly over the Texas horizon, painting the plains in strokes of gold and crimson. The night storm had passed, leaving the air heavy with the smell of rain and wet earth. Puddles shimmered in the dirt road, and the barn roof dripped steadily, each drop striking the ground like the tick of a clock. Inside the cabin, the rancher sat on the edge of his bed, boots planted firmly on the wooden floor, hat in his hands. He had not slept a single hour. The giant bride's words haunted him, every syllable carved deep into his chest. "Do you fear me, or secretly desire me?" He had not answered, and his silence had cut her more deeply than any rejection. He knew it, saw it in her eyes before she walked away. And now, as the dawn rose, he realized something with a weight that could not be shaken. Silence was no longer an option. The ranch could not survive without her strength. The cattle could not be tended, the fences mended, the fields worked, without her tireless hands beside his. But more than that, his heart could not survive the emptiness her absence would leave. He had thought himself a man made of stone, content with work and the quiet company of the land. But she had come, and in her shadow he had discovered fire. He feared it, yes. He feared her power, her size, her spirit. But what he feared most of all was that he had already fallen too far to climb back. He pushed himself to his feet, set his hat firmly upon his head, and stepped out into the morning light. The mud clung to his boots as he walked toward the barn, each step heavy with the weight of decision. Inside, she was already awake. She always rose before him, her body driven by years of labor that demanded discipline. She was brushing down one of the horses, long dark hair falling loose over her shoulder, her movement steady but distant. She did not turn when she heard him enter, though she felt his presence instantly. The silence between them was sharper than any blade. The rancher stood there, struggling for words. His tongue felt heavy, but he knew the time for hesitation was gone. The storm had shown him the truth. Life was too fragile, too fleeting to waste on pride. "I feared you," he began, his voice low but steady. Her hand froze on the horse's mane. Slowly she turned, her eyes narrowing, her jaw tight. "So it is fear then," she said bitterly. "I thought as much." He shook his head, stepping closer, mud drying on his boots. "Not the kind of fear you think. I feared the way you made me feel small. I feared how the sight of you could shake me more than a herd of stampeding cattle. I feared that needing you would make me weak." Her eyes softened, though suspicion lingered. She crossed her arms, her broad shoulders casting a long shadow in the morning light. "And now?" she asked. He drew a breath, lifting his gaze to meet hers fully for the first time since the question had been asked. "Now I see it plain. Your strength doesn't make me weak. It makes me stronger. I don't just desire you. I can't live without you." The words hung in the barn, raw and unpolished, but truer than anything he had ever spoken. For a long moment she said nothing, her dark eyes searching his face for any sign of deceit. She had been lied to before, flattered for amusement, scorned in whispers. But this man, this rancher who had stood silent and proud, now looked at her as though the world itself rested in her hands. Her arms slowly fell to her sides, and for the first time since she had come to his ranch, she allowed herself to breathe freely. "You mean it?" she asked, her voice low, almost trembling. "I swear it," he said. "On this land, on every drop of sweat I've shed working it, I fear you still, but it's the kind of fear a man feels staring at the open sky. Something too big to understand, too powerful to control. But I'd rather face that fear every day than spend one more night without you." A silence followed, but it was no longer sharp. It was soft, fragile, like the pause between heartbeats. She stepped closer, her hand, strong enough to lift a wagon wheel, reaching out with a gentleness that surprised even her. Her fingers brushed against his cheek, calloused and warm. The rancher closed his eyes, leaning into the touch as though it were the only thing keeping him alive. "You are a stubborn man," she whispered, a small, rueful smile touching her lips. "But perhaps you are mine." He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, relief and longing twisting together. "I've been yours since the day you stepped off that stagecoach," he admitted. "I was just too much a fool to see it." Outside, the storm clouds broke apart, revealing a wide stretch of clear blue sky. The ranch shimmered with new life. The fields washed clean by rain, the air sharp and fresh. Horses snorted in the corral, restless but free. It felt as though the world itself had been renewed. From that day forward, the ranch was never the same. The townsfolk still whispered, still cast curious glances when the pair walked through the streets. Some laughed at the sight of the towering bride beside the quiet rancher. Others shook their heads, calling it unnatural, but the rancher no longer cared. Their words had no power against the truth he had found. Together they worked the land. She hauled fence posts with ease, her laughter echoing across the fields as he struggled to keep up. He tamed wild horses, his hands steady as hers held the reins firm. Side by side, they endured the burning sun and the biting cold, each day binding them tighter. At night, they shared the quiet of the cabin, her presence filling every corner, his silence no longer heavy but comfortable. There were moments of struggle, of course. He had to learn to let go of pride, to accept that she was his equal, sometimes even his better. She had to learn to trust that his love was real, not pity or obligation. But with each passing season, they grew stronger, not just as ranchers, but as partners, as lovers, as two souls who had found in each other what the world had denied them. One evening, months after that stormy night, they stood together on the porch, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. The land stretched out before them, endless and untamed, a reflection of the bond they had forged. He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close, and for once she allowed herself to lean into him, her strength resting against his. "Do you still fear me?" she asked softly, a hint of playfulness in her tone. He smiled, eyes never leaving the horizon. "Every day," he admitted. "But I desire you more." Her laughter rang out, rich and full, carrying across the open plains. And in that sound, the rancher knew he had found his answer at last. The giant bride, once mocked and feared, had become the heart of his life, the fire that kept his world alive. And the rancher, once silent and alone, had found his voice in her presence. Together, they were something greater than either had been apart. The coyotes still cried at night, the storm still rolled over the land, the cattle still roamed restless in the fields. But none of it mattered anymore, for in the dark of the night, when the world was silent and only their breaths filled the room, he could finally answer the question without hesitation. He did not fear her. He desired her, and in that desire he had found a love strong enough to outlast the wild, untamed West.